Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my productivity tips that I have kind of curated over the past few months at school. So before we get into the video, if you happen to be doing anything else right now like multitasking, I challenge you to not multitask and just pay attention to this video, because my first tip is to not multitask. When you think of productivity, you may think of multitasking as a helpful tool that will allow you to get more things done quicker. And I used to think that, but recently I've realized that being present and working on one thing at a time is a lot more rewarding, and I'm able to really focus on what I'm doing and kind of get into a flow state more quickly. So when you're working on something, try and just do chunks of different things rather than working on a ton of things at the same time. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was about resistance. I hadn't really heard about this much in the past, but I recently listened to an episode of the Minimalists podcast, and the podcast episode was called The Cluttered Mind, which I've linked below. And in this episode they talked about resistance, which is when you're pushing against something that you don't want to do. And it kind of resonated with me because I feel like a lot of the time I kind of just put off stuff and save it for the time that maybe I'll actually want to do it. So in this podcast episode, the Minimalists interview Dr. Amishi Jha, and she says that the best way to overcome resistance is to catch it sooner and realize that you're resisting so that you can sooner push past it. And I've been trying this over the past few weeks and it's actually been working pretty well. The best thing to do is just to accept that you're resisting something, but just do it anyway. And I found that by overcoming resistance, I get into a flow state a lot quicker. I kind of find out that the task that I was putting off was actually kind of quick and easy in the end. I'm also currently reading the Minimalists book, Love People Use Things, which I'm almost done with. I've been reading it for 2 months now. I'm just such a slow reader. There's this quote in chapter 6, I think, about creativity, and they say all creatives must show up if they want to create. And progress only happens if you decide to at least sit in the chair every day. Next, I wanted to talk about to-do and the concept of taking too much time planning and not enough time doing. I tend to get overwhelmed by really detailed planning systems because it makes me feel like I have to follow every step, and I end up wasting part of my day just planning instead of actually doing the things that I need to do in the first place. For example, when I used to use the bullet journal method, I would spend up to 2 hours a week just creating a spread to write my to-dos in. And of course it's important to take time to plan, but planning became much quicker and simpler for me once I started using To-Do, which this video is not sponsored, I just love To-Do. It's basically a minimalist planning website / app. I usually use it on my computer. And there's no clutter. All there is are sections for each day of the week, and you can type out your to-dos, reorder them, move them to different days, and cross them off. And it's so satisfying to cross things off. And you can also look back across the weeks and past days and see how much you've done. And I used to hate digital planners, but To-Do is the most perfect planning system ever. I love it so much. Again, this video is not sponsored. So my next tip is to plan ahead and break up big projects into separate days. So since many of my classes are project-based, since I go to a design school, I really have to plan ahead to make sure I'm pacing myself so that I finish the project in time. So what I've been doing is I go into To-Do and I map out what I'm gonna do every day for each project up until the due date. And sometimes a big project can be overwhelming, especially when I first get it. I just kind of want to forget about it for a few days until I actually need to start working on it. But it's important to plan out your timeline right when you receive the assignment so that you don't end up pushing it too far off into the future and then just having a ton of work at the end. Speaking of pushing things too far off into the future, my next tip is to think of how your future self will feel if you leave them with all this work. You're kind of always living in the now, so your future self will most likely feel the same way that you do right now about a certain task, so it's better to just start knocking it out. Tip number 6 is to spend your free moments doing something energizing rather than just sitting around or going on your phone. I've started doing yoga in between classes and stuff. I didn't do it during my first quarter of college because my roommate and I kind of had the same schedule, so it was hard to find time to do it. But this quarter I've been able to do it in between classes. For example, I just did it this morning before filming this video. I really like doing yoga early on in the day because once I finish the session, I feel like I've already done something productive. So I have the motivation boost to keep going and keep checking off things from my to-do list. It literally makes such a difference that I feel like I'm 50% more productive on days that I do yoga. And also I've been reading more rather than just sitting on my phone. In between my classes, if I have a spare chunk of time, I like to read a section of a book, and it usually leaves me feeling more awake and like excited for the day rather than wanting to just lay on my bed after my 8 a.m. class. Tip number 7 is to start off your day resisting the urge to scroll on social media. I don't know why, but recently I've been scrolling a lot in my Instagram Explore feed when I'm bored or need a break from my work. A lot of the time I was doing it without thinking, but once I noticed it, I kind of tried to stop and like be like, why are you doing this right now? I don't know why I do it. But if you start off the day remembering to like not scroll, you'll probably retain that mindset throughout the day. So one day last week I was just like doing this a lot during the day. So I was like, how about tomorrow I try to not do this? So the next morning I woke up and I like intentionally planned not to scroll on Instagram. And I actually remembered to do it for the rest of the day. So this makes me think that the earlier on in the day that you like start something or like try and follow a habit, the more likely you are to carry it through the rest of the day. So my next tip is to kind of set yourself a sleep schedule. One of my goals this year was to work on my sleep schedule because during my first quarter of college and in high school too, I would just kind of go to bed whenever I finished my work. And with this schedule, I would sometimes like push off starting my work until later in the night, which would just result with me staying up way later than I should have been, aka like midnight, which apparently isn't that late because some people stay up till like 4 a.m. I don't know how they do it. So at the beginning of this year, I decided I would try to turn my lights off at 11 p.m. on most weeknights so that I'd get around 8 hours of sleep every night. And setting myself this sort of time that I needed to go to bed made sure that I started my work earlier in the day. And it's actually been really nice to go to bed at a decent time so that I'm not exhausted for my 8 a.m. Tip number 9, be able to change your plans and edit your to-do list. So another reason I really like using to-do is because you can move around different tasks. Once you type them, you can basically move them to any day. I find this useful because some days I am maybe more productive than others, or some days maybe I need to work a little bit extra on a certain project, so I just push off something else to tomorrow. And this isn't necessarily like procrastinating a certain task, it's just filling the time that I have with something that I'm like really focused on and then deciding to like continue working on that the rest of the day rather than trying to jump to something else. And maybe some days you have some extra time, so you move some of the to-dos from tomorrow to today and you just get a few things done ahead of time. But remember, don't overwork yourself, because just because you have a few more hours to check off some things for tomorrow doesn't mean you have to. Instead, you could take that time to balance out your day with some activities that you want to do that will maybe like refresh you for the next day to keep you motivated tomorrow. And my last tip for this video is to remember that some weeks you'll have more work, but you'll have other weeks with more downtime if you stay on top of the work during your busy weeks. A few weeks ago, which you might have seen in my most recent vlog, I had an extremely busy week and I felt like I was working just like all day long. I kind of just felt like I couldn't get a break during the whole week. But last week I had way less stuff to do, which was really nice because I got to catch up on just some things that I wanted to do, like reading, and I had some more relaxation time, and I was even able to like plan out some YouTube videos. So just remember that not every week will be extremely busy. So if you plan out your to-do list, you'll be able to find some breaks in between the busyness. And not every day has to be productive. For example, some days I just sit and do nothing and eat Girl Scout cookies. The most important thing is to find the techniques that allow you to get into a flow state quicker so that you get more done in a shorter amount of time, which leaves you with more time for the rest of the day to enjoy some other things that you want to do. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you got some interesting tips from it. I post every Friday, so be sure to come back next Friday for a brand new video. Bye guys.